Today's podcast is brought to you by Funny Bone Broth, now available at Eataly and McEwen's in the TD Center. Or you can visit them at funnybonebroth.com.
In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos podcast. I'm your host, Ben Grant, joined, as always, by JB. How you doing there?
I'm well.
You're holding up?
Yeah, you know, good days and bad days, but, I'm happy to be talking some ball.
Recently, Mike Hogan of the Toronto Argonauts put out an article that I thought was really interesting, and I thought we would lead off the show by talking about some of the quotes in that article. Hoagie had a chance to talk to both Coach Dinwiddie and Coach Reid, the running backs coach, about the quarterback situation coming into this season and the running back situation coming into this season. So I thought we'd maybe lead off by talking about that. And then in our second segment, we can maybe discuss some of the things that were said this week about what a CFL schedule might look like this year. We can go into some detail on that. Sound good with you?
Yeah, terrific. Let's do it.
If you haven't read this article by Mike Hogan, you have to go read it. First of all, you should read anything that Hoagie writes because he knows more than everybody knows. We can analyze things all we want to and pay attention to everything we can, but we do not have the inside access that Mike Hogan has in working with the Toronto Argonauts. So he is a terrific source for anything Argos. So you should read. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably already reading what Mike Hogan says, but yeah, you should definitely go to the Argos website and read all of his articles, including this one. There are some great quotes in here as he breaks down the quarterbacks and running backs. So what we bring to Argos fans is you and I have both coached for a long time. We have a pretty good understanding of coach speak because we've done it and we've heard it a lot. And I'm hoping that in looking at some of these quotes from Hoagie's article, we can translate some of what Coach Dinwiddie and Coach Reid are saying. What I think is interesting about these quotes is that these aren't post-game interviews. These are slow, sit-down, coach has got some time to think about the quote interviews. And you got to agree that makes a pretty big difference in, breaking down what a coach says.
They're obviously going to be pretty close to the vest, I think. They're not looking to reveal very much. They don't want to insult the player. They know the players are going to be reading these as well. But I think that you're more likely to get a bit of honesty here before the season than maybe during the season.
And I think there is, like you said, it is close to the vest. There's no question about that. And always player friendly when they're well thought through like this. But everything means something. Whereas like a post-game interview, sometimes you just say stuff like you and I have both done interviews, and whether it's for newspaper or radio, TV or whatever. If you're running off the field and someone's asking you a question, sometimes things just come out of your mouth and they don't necessarily sound good in the press the next day.
No, I have had incidents where, I said somebody was a damn good team and I assumed that wouldn't run, but that ran verbatim.
I think it led the article.
I remember once talking about how the wheels fell off for my team. That also ran.
You're just sort of bantering with a reporter, just kind of talking, not realizing you're on the record. And
well, that's where with Dinwiddie, I think as a new coach, you might get a little more honesty from him because it's tricky when you say something you believe and it runs verbatim. That sometimes can be a bit surprising.
Yeah, let's take a look at what he said. So first of all, let's take a look at what he said about Matt Nichols. So the first thing he said is, I think Matt's a savvy guy. He's done a lot of great things around the league the last 4 or 5 years and taken that next step in his career. He's a class act as a man, a father. He's got the intangibles of a franchise quarterback. There's a physical toughness and mental toughness. That's what I appreciate about him. the first thing that strikes me when I read that quote is that there's no mention of skill.
No, I'm not gonna lie. That quote raised some eyebrows in my residence.
Because usually in coach speak, when you say someone is a physical, tough player with good mental toughness, it's sort of code for saying, that's their thing. And, they might be missing other elements. Usually that's what you say about a player that tries really hard and gives you everything they've got, but they don't necessarily always, have it.
I think these are the quotes you might use when you're talking about somebody who's got a little more guile. I mean, savvy. Yeah, it's not the world's greatest endorsement, I don't think. I think that he's describing a really good guy. But it feels like they're describing a backup quarterback. I don't think they are. But they're definitely talking about a guy who's going to use guile more than skill.
And it didn't necessarily get better from there. The next thing he said about Nichols was, with him coming off shoulder surgery, there are some things we're going to have to modify in terms of pushing the ball down the field. I don't want to play against his skill strengths. We want to put things in that our guys are comfortable with. If it's something I'm comfortable with and they're not, what's the point? I always want it to be a quarterback-friendly system. So the first part of that, maybe taking some things away where they push the ball down the field, that's interesting to me because that's a lot of what Calgary ran in their offense last year. We've talked a lot about the search package that I did a video feature on, but when they weren't running that search package, there was a lot of downfield throws. You had a lot of verticals, a lot of really deep concepts because it's designed for Bo Levi Mitchell, who's got a cannon. And so, yeah, a lot of that stuff was deep downfield. I wonder when I read that, what this offense is going to look like.
Well, I mean, I like the idea behind it, right? I love that old football coach quote, if you only have red paint, paint the barn red. I like that idea, that your system should be built based on the players you have and not the other way around. I mean, maybe he's just saying that. But philosophically, I like that idea that he's going to do it. But I mean, if you want my honest opinion, if I read this Dinwiddie quote, it's damned with faint praise. I don't know enough about Dinwiddie to know whether he's just being sort of Belichickian in his underplay here. But it definitely is not a ringing endorsement of Nichols, in my opinion.
And I agree with you. And I'm really surprised by it because I had assumed from the moment they signed Nichols that, I guess Coach Dinwiddie, really likes this guy. And I'm a fan of Nichols. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he is the best quarterback on the roster right now. But I expected to read high praise.
Well, I mean, if you read, reading between the lines, which is what we're kind of doing here. I mean, it sounds like he's saying, well, this guy can't really throw the ball, so I guess I'll have to change my offense.
Yeah, no, you can be very successful in the CFL without having a cannon. But you better be mentally and physically tough and better be savvy. And those are the things that are being described here. But it's not an ideal situation. Like, you don't want to go into a game where guile is your best weapon. But what I like about Dinwiddie in terms of the quarterbacks is that being a former quarterback himself and a guy who had to use his brain because he wasn't the most gifted athlete ever. He had to use his smarts to be successful. And he's got to be able to look at a guy like Matt Nichols and say, okay, this is a guy I can trust because I know what this is.
Yeah, and he may be, smartly underplaying expectations here on Matt.
Yeah, and I was also wondering, like, maybe is this for Bethel Thompson's benefit?
Well, when we move on to the next quote, I mean, he's clearly opening the door to a quarterback competition,
which stunned me.
Might stunned Pinball too,
because I think that's a nice thing to say going into camp. You want to say, yeah, it's a competition. Everyone's fighting for their job. We'll take the best players. I think a lot of coaches say that, but not usually in the context of an interview like this when you're going through one player at a time.
I hate it. I hate that talk. I hate that conversation. That
I'm fine with it when it's real. Like if you've got four players and you really don't know which one's the best, then you say that.
That's what. Well, I'm saying if you have four players and you don't know who's the best, then you're in trouble.
No, it could be a good situation. These guys are all.
You
got
should
a new
be able
coach.
to know. You should be able to know.
But he hasn't coached these guys before.
Well, just looking on film.
Yeah, but that's not everything. You can look at it on film. But like one of the things he says about Bethel Thompson, we'll get there in a second, but he's not sure about all the advantages and disadvantages that McLeod Bethel Thompson had in the last few years. And so, film has a way when you're surrounded by a team that just doesn't have a lot of talent on it, your film is not going to look great. Now, there are individual things that you might be able to do, and you can still gauge some things, obviously, but it's much harder to do. And sitting there in camp, watching a guy running your drills on your field, watching your three guys that you've never coached before, I still think it's a weird thing to say, but I don't expect him to necessarily have known just from watching film exactly what all these three guys are all about.
Well, I think the takeaway from the Nichols quotes, I think is positive if he's willing to change his offense based on who he's going to look at in quarterback. But it was surprisingly under enthusiastic because there were a lot of, he's a nice man and he has a nice lawn and a good haircut. So I mean, just playing that out, usually you talk about why they're good at football. Obviously competition at every position is good. But I think you have to be very wary of saying that you're running a meritocracy because it's very rarely a meritocracy. And you can immediately fall into, kind of a hypocrite hole because players get paid a certain amount of money. There's ownership positions. There's a lot in the mix as to who gets to play and who doesn't. And so while I appreciate Dinwiddie's enthusiasm, I think he should be careful about promising open competition because that'll end up looking badly for him if it's not. Do you know what I mean? Like, if...
Well, we've seen that happen before.
If it's not actually an open competition, right? Like if the powers that be who went out and got this quarterback want him to start, I think you have to say that and let it play out. I think if you say I'm going to let the quarterbacks just roll and whoever's the best is the best, I just think usually a coach has to have a lot of power to run a true meritocracy because there's so many other factors at work as to who gets to start and who doesn't.
Although I think in this setup with this new regime, I really believe they want to win. And I think if they all see what Coach Dinwiddie sees through whether or not there is a preseason or how that works, if one of the guys is clearly better than everyone else, I think everyone in the organization will be on board with starting that guy. Maybe with the exception, I don't know if that's the case with Michael O'Connor, but I think if Bethel Thompson...
You think that the general manager who went out and signed this free agent is gonna be fine? Come on. That's where I worry with Dinwiddie is he can say that, but there's no way that management is fine with McLeod Bethel Thompson being the opening day quarterback. I'm saying right now, zero chance that Argos management is going to have McLeod Bethel-Thompson starting day one.
I think that's usually the case, and I think 99% of the time that's exactly what happens, and the coach will get overruled. Well, I don't know. It depends on what we're talking about.
Like, we're talking about a big money free agent being signed.
But let's say we have two preseason games. Let's say we have two preseason games.
Mm-hmm.
Both quarterbacks are given an equal shot, and I'm going to leave Michael O'Connor out for the time being.
Well, equal is tough because, you got ones versus twos and twos in, threes in.
So let's say they find a way to give them, one starts one game, one starts another game. Let's say Nichols gets out there and throws 7 picks and fumbles the ball 4 times. And Bethel-Thompson looks like a hero in his start. You don't think, I know this is obviously an extreme example, but you don't think there's a way that they say, well, let's give Bethel-Thompson a start?
No.
It doesn't matter.
That's what I'm saying. I'm telling you, he has stepped in it here. There is no chance that the management team is not going to have Nichols be the number 1 quarterback going into camp and going into game 1. And I think, he's talking here about open competition, but, it's just not true at many positions on the field. If you have a guy who's making a lot of money, that guy's going to start. And
well, Bethel-Thompson's actually making pretty good money.
He's making okay money, but he didn't get signed they didn't sign a free agent to have him sit on the bench for the guy who led the team to all those losses last year. I guarantee
it was not. There's no way you can put all those losses on Macbeth last year. Like, his numbers were outstanding.
I agree. I'm just telling you.
He led the league in touchdowns.
I'm just telling you, it feels like a bit of a rookie coach mistake to say it's an open competition when it's not going to be an open competition, in my opinion.
So this is what he said about the QB competition. He said, I want open competitions everywhere. One guy is going to be the 1 going into game 1. One guy is going to be the 2. That doesn't mean it's not going to change. Maybe one guy isn't playing well, and as well as we'd like him to, and we're going to give the other guy a shot. I want them to have a healthy environment in the QB room, but I want them to know it's anybody's job to take.
I know. I mean, I just feel like that's his inexperience. Like, that's not, in my opinion, a successful philosophy. You have a QB1 and QB2. And that's the hierarchy, and that's what it is. And in no universe is having 2 quarterbacks fighting for the starting position a successful environment. It's not like linebacker. It's not how the quarterback position works. You can't have, he's the leader and then you take off a hat and you put it on the other guy. No, he's the leader. Like, it's just not how it works. I think he's making a mistake there. I think at the quarterback position, you make your decision early, and he's a 1 and he's a 2, and you move forward with it. And, maybe halfway through the season, if you have to make a change, you make a change. But I just think there's no future to hedging your bet at quarterback. It's not a position. It's not a position you can do that because they are the leader of the team. They need to be chosen early, in my opinion. I think Dinwiddie's making a mistake here.
I have to agree with you. Like, having been a quarterback's coach and an offensive coordinator, I can't stand not knowing who the quarterback is, or having the team not know who the quarterback is.
Right. You can't develop an offense if you're choosing between 2 different quarterbacks. He's talking about making an offense around his QB. Well, those 2 guys have different skill sets. So, which one are you going to build it around in terms of chemistry with receivers, in terms of reps? You can't split reps. QB1 gets all the reps.
Well, he says at the end of that quote, he says, I want those guys fighting every rep at practice to prove to me that they're the guy.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with the sense of competition. But I think that you want QB1 taking all the reps and aggressively trying to keep QB2 off the field. And that's the dynamic that makes for a good quarterback room, but there's a clear hierarchy. You don't have two head coaches saying, I hope these two head coaches are competitive with each other and we'll see, like that doesn't make any sense. Of course not. You can't have two quarterbacks fighting to be the leader of a team. You're just going to split a team.
And it's because of that leadership element. Like the reason, because I would encourage this with pretty much any other position on the football team except at quarterback, because
right.
Everybody wants to know where they're looking.
You don't want a scenario where you split the offense, where some guys are Macbeth guys and some guys are Nichols guys, and there's a disconnect there, which is no good for the quarterback. And secondly, even worse, what you don't want is Macbeth to outplay Nichols having the touch, being put in as QB1, and now everything you've said looks hollow.
And now you've lost the room.
With his analysis, the Macbeth stuff, he talks about his arm talent. The review of Macbeth is better.
Yeah, well, let's read what he said about McLeod Bethel Thompson. He said, he's been through a lot here the last couple of years. Haven't we all? Yeah. He's battled through it. I think he's a better athlete than people say. In terms of arm talent, he's right there with the best in the league. He's been around a lot of systems, so he knows football. For him, it's a matter of winning football games. I don't think he's had the opportunity to do that with what's surrounded him in the last couple of years. He might shock some people this year. I feel really good about him. It's going to be a great battle between those two. Yeah. That is stunning to me. That is absolutely stunning to me.
If the QBs were reading this, if Nichols reads it, he's not dumb. So who knows? Maybe he's trying to light a fire under Nichols.
I wonder if, because what I immediately started thinking about when I read some of these quotes is, especially knowing that he was a quarterback, a quarterback who had a shot in the NFL, played in the CFL, played some big time football as well. I wonder if along the way that was something that worked for him. He was at Boise State. And he was in some quarterback battles, but maybe that's something that worked for him as a quarterback. And so maybe he doesn't see the danger of when that sometimes goes wrong.
Yeah. Maybe he was in situations where he felt like it should have been an open competition and it wasn't. And now given the chance to run his own show, he's going to do what others didn't. But I think he's going to find out that there is no way management is going to let him choose the starting day quarterback.
I have more faith in management than that, but
I will put whatever wager you want down if we want to do a wager, but I will put a wager now that Macbeth does not start opening day.
Well, I don't think he will either, but I think it's because I think Matt Nichols will ultimately look a little bit better in camp if there's a camp. Now, if there's no camp at all, then I think obviously Nichols ends up being the starter. So I think the only scenario I'm saying in which Macbeth starts is if he dramatically outplays Nichols in whatever preseason there may or may not be. All right, let's move on to the running back situation. So Hoagie had a chance to interview Fred Reed, Coach Reed, the new running backs coach. I don't think he gave as much away.
No, he speaking of savvy,
like Reed was still playing in like 2010, I think. He had that. I know 2009 was when he had that monster game for Winnipeg where he ran for like 300 yards. But I think he played at least a year or two after that. So he hasn't been coaching that long, and it's his first CFL job. He's been coaching high school down in Florida for the last few years. So if there's going to be a coach to come out and say something where like, whoa, I would think this would be him. But no, he basically just gives the same analysis that you'll find on our X's and Argos website. Looking through what some of these players do well and don't do well, he basically says those same things. So
he doesn't really know any of them, right? He would, in terms of,
and that's probably it too, right? Like he probably just knows them the way we do, which is just on film.
Ironically, he could have been more about open competition, because I think at the running back position, all bets are off. I think it is a pure competition at running back. I don't think that there's anybody who's making, starter money per se.
No, you can have a rotating backfield. Like I said, at almost any other position, I don't like to do it at offensive line. I think that's another one where you
Right.
want some continuity, but quarterback is the one no. If there's another one, it's offensive line. I think it's dangerous. Kickers, I think that's another weird one.
Yeah, it's true. I don't think you want a competition at kicker. I mean, yes, you can have a competition at kicker if you want to get rid of the kicker that you have.
Yeah, and I think that's the only way
So that
you
makes
do
sense.
it.
But if you like the kicker you have, you don't bring in competition, because then you're going to end up with the other guy you bring in more times than not. So it's
for different reasons. It's not for the same reasons that you don't want to bring in another good quarterback. It's because with a kicker, it's such a psychological game. So it's not because of leadership where everyone's like, well, who do I look to? Who's the leader here? They don't need to know necessarily, well, who's my kicker? It's more about the kicker themselves. When you bring in a second kicker who legitimately pushes you, and this is a game where it's so mental, then you're putting the incumbent at a huge disadvantage, I think.
Yeah, I just think the idea of open competition is a good one, but it's not one that applies equally across every position.
So here's what Coach said about Carlos Williams. He was really explosive and showed some great things in Buffalo. That's going back a few years. He has it all.
It is.
He has it all. He's a big, powerful back. He has speed. He can break tackles. He's a complete back, and I'm glad to have a chance to coach him up. If he comes to camp healthy, he's got a really good shot of making us do some great things. To me, in that quote, he's the starting back as long as there's nothing wrong with him.
Well, I mean, he has the best resume of anybody that they're bringing in. He's a lottery ticket. If he can come in with some, if he comes in good shape, he certainly has lots of talent. I mean, being successful in the NFL is not going to guarantee CFL success, but I mean, he was successful at the NFL level, so he clearly had elite. And I notice how Coach Reed bounces back and forth in tense there, but he certainly had elite running back skills.
See, I think when he says if he comes to camp healthy, I think that's coach speak for if he comes to camp in shape.
Yes. Oh, for sure. Healthy is fit.
Yeah.
And if that's a big if, that if is in 14 font bold.
Well, we haven't seen him in a long time. So
I know
we don't know. No,
I mean,
we've seen some.
A coach doesn't say if he comes to camp healthy. I think that's a pretty big caveat from a coach. If you're reading between the lines, we'll see, maybe, but that I think that he is not. I wouldn't say that he. I would say that he's unsure of Carlos Williams.
All right, let's see what he said about Marcus Thigpen. He said, we're going to move him in and out, move him around. He's going to play some running back, some receiver. He's one of those type of guys. He's also a punt returner, kick returner, so he's going to be everywhere. He can stretch the field. You can use him out of the backfield. There's multiple things you can do with a guy like that. He's valuable. So what I immediately take out of that quote is he's going to be on the team. There's no question about that. But I don't think he's in the picture for starting running back.
No, I think he clearly is a special teams, special team specialist, and a little bit of scat back. Coach clearly likes him. All of those.
You can't not like him. You look at what
right.
Thigpen has some great film, and everyone speaks so highly of him.
Everything is in the present tense, which is really nice. So and they talk about him in the future tense. So he's clearly a lock. But yeah, a coach seems to be excited about him, and I agree. I mean, I think of all the guys that they have in what I think is not an area of strength for the team. I think, he's a pro and he's going to be on the team and he's going to be a good special teamer. But
I just think it's funny that like coach seems to be talking about him like he's this young prospect, but he's a 34-year-old running back. He's 34.
Yeah.
He still looked pretty fast. Like, the last time we saw him, he was moving pretty well. I think where he's lost it a little bit is that side to side. But we'll see. We'll see how his knees are doing and what he looks like. But I just don't think from that quote, I don't think Coach Reid.
Well, I think Coach Reid is happy to have a CFL running back on his roster.
Well,
I mean, there's a lot of question marks when he looks down his clipboard.
That's true, and that is a nice certainty.
So I think
you've always got him.
I think he's very excited about the CFL guy.
So if Carlos Williams, shows up weighing 400 pounds and Bishop Sankey can't move, at the very least,
right? I mean, those. I think both of those are not unlikely situations. But anyways, let's moving on to your fantasy hero,
my man Bishop Sankey. He says, this sounds like my quote. He says, Sankey is a guy I've always been a fan of, back to his time in Washington and Tennessee. He's a great back. He has the burst and the ability to break tackles. He catches the ball well out of the backfield. He's another guy that I'm excited to see what he brings to camp for us.
Yeah, I mean, that's good. I'm encouraged by, Coach Reid.
They're not in the dark as much about Sankey, though, because remember, he was on the team in October. He was working out with the team. He was on the practice squad, and he was never activated for a game. But he had a chance to acclimate himself to the CFL rules. They had a chance to look at him, and they haven't said goodbye. This isn't going to work. He's still there.
Yeah, and I think you can see that in the quote. I think that the quote is less conditional. He's not. He doesn't say if Sankey shows up healthy. I think he believes Sankey will show up healthy.
I think Sankey will show up healthy too. So let's take a look at A.J. Ouellette. Now, this quote sounds like the Matt Nichols quote, the A.J. Ouellette quote. But you expect to read it about A.J. Ouellette. You don't expect to read it about Matt Nichols. So Coach Reid says, I'm excited to see A.J. in camp. I watched him back at Ohio University. He was a great back. Maybe not as explosive as other backs, but he's a hard runner. He's a hard worker. I talked to him a couple of days ago, and he's excited. He's ready to get to camp. He's one of those guys who comes to work every day and works hard to earn his time on the field. He's that kind of guy. That is what you say about A.J. Ouellette. Like, we watched him last year for those few games, and I think we know what he is. He works hard. He runs really hard. He gives everything he has on every carry, but he's just, I don't think he's the guy. So I think he can be a real asset to the team, but I don't think it's going to be as an every down tailback. So we move on to Trayon Gray. Hoagie had a really interesting tidbit. And this is what I was saying earlier about how Hoagie has access to information that the rest of us don't. Hoagie says that Trayon Gray is now down to 220. So this is a running back that played as big as, I believe, 245. So when he ran that 4.37 at his pro day, he weighed 233. And so he's now 13 pounds lighter than that. He's only, 2 years older. He's still a young guy. And he was already blazing fast as a fullback. And now, what's that 4.37 going to look like with 13 pounds less to carry around? So this is what Coach had to say about Trayon Gray. He's a powerful back with speed. He ran a 4.37 at his pro day. He can be amazing. He was only at training camp with the Cleveland Browns, but he showed some good film there. With an opportunity, he could do some great things for us. You think he's in the mix?
I do. Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that weight loss also suggests that he believes it too. I think, I think he looks at this. If you're him, and you look at this running back depth chart, and you have, the door's there. I mean, it's wide open. I mean, you have a veteran towards the end of his career on the roster. You got this kid from Ohio who's not a threat to you. You've got two Americans who are both question marks. I mean, the starting running back position is 100% available. And I think Gray should go take it.
I like Gray a lot, but what I don't like about his game is that, and again, he was a very different player and he was being asked to do different things. But in watching all his Florida State film, he doesn't have any shiftiness. It was just one direction as fast as you can go. There was no juking, there were no moves, there was nothing. It helps to be shifty. Like most of the successful backs in the CFL have moves. They have that agility. They're able to bounce to the outside, make a quick cut. And yeah, Gray just has never shown that to me. And I think that was ultimately his problem in Cleveland. He actually put up some good film, like Coach said. He had a great touchdown run, but it was just one direction. They were in a heavy set, and he took the ball and just sprinted as fast as he could to the pylon. And I think everyone was really surprised at the speed that he had. But yeah, he was never asked to do anything more than run straight. And so, does losing that weight help? Well, it's not going to hurt. Certainly, it's got to help. But how much? In my experience, guys that are shifty have always been shifty. Guys that can bounce back and forth have always been able to do that. I've never seen a running back who couldn't do that suddenly be able to.
Well, I think at the very least, I think he certainly can be in the lead for the short yardage back.
Oh yeah, I think he'd be a terrific short yardage back. Let's talk about the fullbacks. With Declan Cross, he's getting a little bit of that AJ Ouellette treatment, but he's a similar kind of running back. But Declan Cross is another guy where you know exactly what he is, and it's incredibly useful. He says he's the kind of guy you want in your locker room, a tough, smart kid. I like Declan a lot. He can block in the run game for us. He can also run the ball. He brings a lot of value to us. He'll bring leadership to the locker room. He's a hard worker who can do multiple things on special teams.
Yeah, I mean, from coach speak, I mean that's a guy a coach is in love with.
Yeah,
I mean that's basically a coach proposing marriage.
Well, how can you not love Declan Cross?
Right. I mean, that's all the boxes. I mean, there's no, double speak or kind of, you know what I mean. Those are like, from a coach perspective, the fact that he can block. The fact that he is useful in the locker room, and the fact that he's a tough, smart kid. I mean, I know these seem like cliches, but coaches, especially at this level, are not going to throw around the phrase "tough, smart kid" lightly.
Agreed.
It just sounds like casual football talk, but you'll notice like it's not used for anybody else. Like. You say somebody's a tough, smart kid, that's, football coaches are not, I think, generally sort of understated. And that's a heck of a compliment for Declan.
He was a little bit more reserved with Régis Sibassou, a guy I like a lot, though. Like I've been waiting for Sibassou because he was so good in university. Watching him, just playing out there in Quebec, he was unstoppable, and he was a receiver, good size. He seemed to be able to do everything. I thought he would be a great CFL player, and we haven't really had a chance to see it yet. Here's what he said about Sibassou. He's more of a special teams guy. I didn't get a chance to see him do the same things on offense like Declan does, but he's got a big body and is more of a Declan Cross type back.
Yeah, he's pretty low down the depth chart.
Sounds like.
I didn't see him, but I hear he's big. Okay.
Yeah, that quote doesn't make Sibassou sound like a guy that Coach Reid is counting heavily on coming into this season. So some really interesting quotes. I think we did about as well as we could in terms of interpreting coach speak. But again, if you haven't had a chance to read the article, go to the Argos website, take a look at Hoagie's article, because it's a really good read, and I do think, like I said before, there's some gold in there.
So some big news out actually this week, which was good, because I know we were a little concerned about what we might talk about if there was no season. Commissioner Randy Ambrosie brought out the idea of a condensed season, a season that will start in September, potentially with a Grey Cup in December, and that the Grey Cup host will be the team with the best regular season record. So there is no official Grey Cup host this year. They're going to kind of keep it fluid. So that was the big news out of the league. I know maybe a week or two ago they were talking seriously about shutting the season down. I think optimism in some of the other professional leagues has inspired them to feel upbeat about it.
I would like to express how disappointed I am that obviously it's upsetting that we're not going to see football this summer, but I'm especially disappointed that we're not going to get to have the Halifax game. I was really looking forward to it. It sounded like it was going to be a terrific setup for this year. The Touchdown Atlantic thing, I'm still really excited about the prospects of a team out that way. And man, that's of all the games we're losing, that's the one that hurts the most.
Yeah, that was really disappointing. I know my brother was going to go. I had a friend heading home to Halifax to go see it. I had tickets for it. It was going to be a great day. Yeah, that was
a great week. It sounded like it was going to be basically like Super Bowl week with events going on throughout the week leading up to the game. I think it would have been an amazing experience. I was planning on going down for it as well. Thanks for including me in your ticket purchase.
Well, I know that your travel plans are sometimes up in the air. I didn't want to go so far as to suggest that you were going to be able to make it. I think they're going to wait and see what happens in the other leagues. They're going to, if baseball starts, if basketball starts, if NFL camp starts. I mean, all of these things will happen before September potentially. So I think the CFL is smart to wait and see. What do these leagues come up with? What protocols work? What protocols don't? And how they're going to do it. So I mean, I think that was interesting. I'm excited about what that would look like. I mean, if you think you're starting in September with camp, what are you looking at? Maybe 8-game season? How many teams you let in the playoffs? I mean, probably you just go 4, right?
I think you could actually have the playoffs set the same way. I don't think you have to change too much. I think all you do is trim it down to an 8-game season and you go into the playoffs like you always do. I don't think there's any reason why you can't. You're just talking about one extra week. The issue with the CFL is the 9 teams because it means every team has to have a bye. And so if you're basically running a 9-week long season with 8 games, I guess is how you're planning that.
That would be my guess.
But it's unfortunate they don't have that even number where you could run, an 8-game season in 8 weeks or a 9-game season if you're going to use the full 9. But yeah, I think they go with the full playoff setup if they're able to start. Now it's a big if, but if they're able to start in September and actually get things going, then yeah, I don't see any reason why they couldn't run an 8-game season, run the playoffs as they always do, and have the Grey Cup in minus 30-degree weather in Calgary.
Well, I mean, hopefully we learn more over the summer, and they're able to come up with something that's really safe for the players. It all seems, I think it's all written in sand at the moment, but it's a positive because I would say a month ago they were very much leaning towards canceling the season. I mean, they've gone to the government for money. I think they will get it because, yeah, I think the financial devastation is real. I mean, I think, it's a league that is always a little rickety financially. To flush a season could be deadly.
What's going to be an issue here with the CFL, though, is that you can't run it without fans in the building. That does nothing for you in terms of making money because it's such a gate-dependent league. It's not the same as the NFL. The NFL would do just fine without fans in the seats. It's better with them in terms of revenue, but the TV money is so massive that it more than makes up for not having fans in the seats.
It'll be interesting with the fan perspective because I'm not a doctor, as many people know. But there certainly has been a lot of evidence that outdoor transmission is not remotely the same as indoor transmission. I think that's one thing that potentially for football is in its favor is being outdoors has certainly been, to my knowledge, through reading different things, that there's been very little transmission outdoors. That the transmission issues are in closed locations. The league clearly is getting some positive information. I think if they were getting really negative information, they would just mothball the thing right now. It'll be interesting to see. I don't know how salaries will work and all of that, but I think that's a great. I think it's great news for the CFL that they're going to take a shot at running a league in September and an 8-game season to be really exciting. I mean, it's basically like watching the playoffs.
I'd be excited about a 1-game season at this point. All right, well, that'll just about do it for us today. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, please don't forget to subscribe, to rate, to tell every Argos fan you know about us. On behalf of JB, I'm Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. See ya.